Just about time there, folks. Howdy, howdy. Well, hi there, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining me for this CCNA version 3.0 update. My name is Brandon Carroll, and I'm coming to you from the cave. This is my little audio recording studio, and typically I wouldn't do a broadcast with some video in here, but we are in a transition, so I don't have our green screen room set up, so otherwise I'd do it from there. But this will work out. I wanted to spend a little bit of time because I've had a lot of requests from people asking me, hey, what's this new CCNA version 3.0 all about? And so I thought, you know what, it'd be a good idea if I just put together a couple slides and talked about some of the changes and also shared with you some of the things that we're going to do here at Global Config. So let me go ahead and share with you what's going on or what we're planning on doing here. Right here is what I want to share out there. Okay. So basically, Cisco has announced a brand new version 3.0 of their CCNA program. And there are some pretty significant changes, and they make sense. Really, really, they do. First of all, they have new course numbers. Anytime they come out with a new course, it's going to get a new number that's associated with it. And these are the numbers that you're going to be looking up when you take the exam. So ICND 1 is now 100-105. ICND 2 is 200-105. And if you're going to take the combined CCNA exam, well, you're going to want to take the ICND and ICND 2 combined exam, which is actually 200-125. And so kind of important that you do understand that they are new exam numbers. You don't want to schedule the old one, especially if you're planning on doing that one right there, that brand new one, 200-125. Okay, and that is probably the way that I would recommend you go if you're doing something like a refresh or if you have some experience. If you don't have any experience, you're kind of new to networking, then I would recommend that you go with ICND 1 and ICND 2 first. That's probably going to be a little easier to tackle. And you definitely don't want to bite off more than you can chew. And that's what happens a lot of times is people just bite off more than what they can chew. Now let's do a little bit of a domain comparison between the old and the new. And so if we look at the old ICND 1 version 2.0, you can see that it was actually 7 modules. And so I teach this course. I've taught this course for quite a long time. In fact, I've taught it since it was ICND 1, and when it first came into existence, and when it was actually just called ICND, and it contained all of the topics that you would need to become a CCNA. Well, now things have changed, and what you have is the ICND 1 topics, which you can pass this exam, and it'll get you the CCENT certification, or CCENT, which is the Entry Network Technician certification. And then if you take the ICND 2 exam, the 2 of those combined, passing both gets you the CCNA. Well, that's not how it used to be. It used to be just ICND, and then you would pass ICND, and it would give you the CCNA certification. But that's besides the point now. That's times long past. But in this most recent version 2.0, we would start this course out talking about how IP data networks function, and then we would go into our LAN switching technologies, which makes sense. In fact, we've still done that. The course has been streamlined a bit here, network fundamentals, and then LAN switch technologies. From there, you can see how the course would roll into a specific section on IP addressing. And boy, did the students dread this. Spending a lot of time on binary and subnetting and all that kind of stuff. So we would go to IP addressing and then IP routing technologies. The interesting thing is these two are really tied together, very much so. So now we just have routing technologies as a domain, and your IP addressing would fall inside of that routing technology because we use layer 3 addresses, which is what an IP address is. And so that makes the most sense. We then have what used to be called IP services, and then we had network device security and troubleshooting. Now we've got infrastructure services and infrastructure management. And of course, troubleshooting would be sprinkled in throughout that. Anytime you're learning any of these technologies, you'll learn how to troubleshoot as you go along. Now, here are some things that were removed from ICND 1 that folks have kind of said, wait, what's going on there? Well, in terms of routing protocols, we have OSPF, which is a routing protocol that's link state, and we covered single area OSPF. Well, now that was moved out of ICND 1 and moved over into ICND 2. And now RIP is being used to introduce a CCNA candidate to your routing protocols. Now, this is sort of significant because RIP used to be there, and then it was ripped out, and now it's been put back in. And so people have said, well, why is that going on? What's up with that? And I have my opinions on it. We'll talk about that in a minute. I've got a specific slide dedicated to answering that question for you. Also, dual stack was removed. Now, dual stack, what is that? It is a technology that's basically running IPv4 and IPv6 at the same time. Yeah, we do that, but it's not the only transition technology that's in use, so it was removed. And then Cisco Express Forwarding, or CEF, has been removed from ICND 1. Okay, just answering a couple questions here, or at least viewing a couple of questions. What's been added into ICND 1? Well, ICND 1 has added several new items. First of all, now you're going to get a high-level knowledge of how networks interact with other types of devices like firewalls and wireless access points and wireless controllers. And that's important to understand. You can't walk into a network and not understand interaction. And so that was sort of lacking before. Now it's there. And another thing is that we introduced students in ICND 1 to a 3-tier architecture, access distribution core. And that's great, but that's not likely what you're going to see in a small network. And so you're going to have a collapsed core at best. So the awareness of the collapsed core is now compared to the 3-tier architecture. And again, it's probably a little more along the lines of what a candidate's going to see these days. Configuring and verifying stateless address auto configuration with IPv6 has been added in there, right? Getting addresses on your devices, much like DHCP. I wouldn't compare it, one for one, but again, it makes sense. And then it's something that you definitely have to know working in your networks. At least getting addresses, some of the basics there. And then also being added is Anycast to the different IPv6 address types. That was not covered before. Also, LLDP, the link layer discovery protocol, has been added in there in addition to CDP. Now, the old ICND 1 used to just focus on Cisco discovery protocol. LLDP is an industry standard, and so that's appropriate that you are able to compare between the two. A lot of devices are using LLDP these days. RIP version 2 for IPv4 is now the primary focus, and that's good. It helps you understand how routing works. There's been some added requirements to what you need to understand for DNS and DHCP, especially along the lines of connectivity and troubleshooting and how these work. If you can't solve simple DHCP problems and get an address for a device, then who says you can troubleshoot the rest of the network, right? These are just fundamental things that you've got to know. Syslog messaging has been added in here, and then some device management stuff like backing up and restoring your configs, your licensing, and your time zones. Again, just basic management stuff. That's all been added to ICND1. Now, if we compare the ICND2 domain between v2.0 and v3.0, what you'll notice is they're not too far different. You'll notice that WAN technologies, the section 5 or domain number 5, WAN technologies, that's looks a little different there, and that's because we've made some changes. The WAN technologies is now in the 3.0 section, and frame relay is a thing of the past, finally. And that's been something that's been hanging around for a long time. I've worked with frame relay, but you know what? When I started out, we had ISDN, and that's been gone for a while. Nobody really said much about that when it left. So frame relays going to the wayside, and more in our networks today, we're not seeing frame relay as much as we used to. So it makes sense that some of the newer technologies are covered, our broadband connections and so on. So we cover LAN switching technologies. That's pretty much the same. You'll notice that the new terminology, routing technology, got rid of IP, because that's not just what we're dealing with. It's not just IP, which kind of ensues IP version 4. We're doing IP version 6 as well. We got infrastructure services and infrastructure maintenance. So again, some changes that have occurred here in our ICND1 to the domains. If we looked at what has been removed from ICND2, frame relay and serial WAN technologies. Good to finally see that go. And then VRRP and GLBP have been removed, and we only focus on HSRP. Now, those are first hop redundancy protocols. In other words, gateway redundancy. And so it was really difficult to introduce a learner at the ICND2 level to these different types of first hop redundancy protocols and really not spend any time getting to know any of them. So more focus is on HSRP. It's the most commonly used one of the first hop redundancy protocols, and so that's been left alone. But VRRP and GLBP have been removed. Also, dual home versus single homed IWAN topologies have been added. So IWAN, if you're not familiar with that, that gets us into the software-defined WAN, or that, at least that's the space where that product or that solution from Cisco competes. They compete against companies like Viptela. You have basic knowledge of eBGP. Now, don't freak out. Some people look at that and they go, oh no, BGP's in here. It's okay. BGP is not very difficult. Yes, there is a 5-day course on nothing but BGP, but it's nice because you actually get to focus on that one protocol. You understand how the core works, and then you build on all the features that are involved in BGP. A basic eBGP connection is not difficult to work with and not difficult to understand. There are expanded VPN topics. So DMVPN is in there. Well, IWAN uses a DMVPN overlay. Site-to-site VPN, client VPN technologies, the things that are newer, AnyConnect client type stuff, that's going to be covered now. That's been added to ICND2. The topics have been expanded there rather than just give you a very brief introduction. And then also understanding of how cloud resources are being used and cloud architectures, how that affects traffic paths and traffic flows, virtualized services, and now the basics of NFV, or network function virtualization. These are all topics that have been added here, and boy, does this stuff make sense. Here's another one, awareness of programmable network architectures. So SDN, software-defined networking. The act of separating the control plane from the data plane. So all of your network devices have the data plane. They receive information from a controller that sits up top. Controller pushes that information down. It doesn't sit in the data path. And if the controller were to go down, the network data plane is still there. It keeps forwarding traffic. So you're going to learn how a controller functions in ICND2, how it talks northbound to applications and then southbound to the infrastructure, to your routers and your switches. And it does all this through APIs. And so we'll talk about what that is in the new ICND2 version 3.0 course. Path trace application for ACLs, that's part of the APIC EM module. That is the controller, the Application Policy Infrastructure Controller, APIC EM Enterprise module. Not to be confused with the data center module, the APIC DC. Two different controllers there. We also have QoS concepts that have been added in here. And boy, I think this is just a fantastic addition to ICND2 because we have these integrated networks. We have voice, video, data, all riding on the same pipes. And you know what? We're just bound to see traffic that needs prioritization or special handling. And so that was sort of left out of the early stages before and included into the later stages of certification, into the routing and switching NP program. And there was also a QoS. There is a QoS course specifically, a 5-day course available for that. But again, it just makes sense to put it down at this ICND2 associate level so that the technologies that you're learning when you come out of this program as an associate truly are skills that are valuable in today's network. Now let's talk about a transition plan. All right, so what should you do if you are currently working on these exams? That's something that my students have asked me. The first option is just cut over now, right? Cut your losses and say, you know what, I'm just going to pick up all the new material. I'm just going to rush right into this new stuff, and then I'll take these new exams. That's fine. And you may want to do that. In fact, I think you'll be a better network administrator or network associate if you come out of the program with the new exams. You're going to know more of the newer technologies. Your second option is just to sprint to the finish line. Finish ICND1 by August 20th or ICND2 by September 24th. And that is definitely an option. And your third option is just play it by ear. Now, if people say, I'll just play it by ear and see what happens, that really tells me that they're not really interested in certifying or really they don't really care when they get to it. It's not that big of a priority to them. So if you want to play it by ear, go ahead. Just note that you may end up in a situation where you're just going to have to go with option 1 and cut over to the new exams anyhow. Now, here's my thoughts on the new and old content. So first of all, why is OSPF no longer in ICND1 and RIP v2 has been added again? It was there and then it was gone and now it's back. Well, look, a RIP version 2 has been around for a long time. It's a very simple routing protocol. It's real easy to teach and it's real easy to learn. And so by using RIP version 2 at the entry network technician level for a CCNA candidate, that just builds a real good foundation for you. It gives you really the basics that you're going to need to understand how routing works and some of the problems that we've experienced in routing. And then when you learn about things like OSPF, you say, oh, that makes sense why they're doing it that way now. I get it. Another question that comes up from the students, QoS, cloud, network programmability. Why is all that stuff there now? Well, this was just obvious transition. You look back in November, I don't know if it was November 2005. I think it was November like 2015. That's a typo there in my slide. So just last year, November of 2015, I'm going to actually annotate this right now on the fly. 2015 is when that was. This network programmability was introduced into the CCIE program. And so you started hearing these announcements on how you would have to understand some of this stuff to be a CCIE. That's obvious. Well, today it makes sense. You also need to understand this stuff at the associate level. And the associate level has long been regarded as one of the core certifications that a networking professional should get. And so definitely makes sense that we would see this new stuff there on the exams now. All right, so here's some closing thoughts. I know we've talked about quite a few things and we've gone through pretty quick. We're only about 18, 19 minutes into this broadcast here. And so just some closing thoughts on the new CCNA. First of all, the direction that is being taken these days is not surprising to me at all. It completely makes sense that network programmability and NFV and all these things are being introduced into the CCNA program. The fact is training programs have to change as networking shifts focus. And if you haven't been keeping up these days, data networking has absolutely shifted focus. And many companies are starting to place a lot of emphasis on programmability, software-defined everything, the software-defined data centers, software-defined WAN, and so on. NFV, like I said, network function virtualization, some emphasis here across the board. And so it only makes sense that these topics are going to be worked into the training programs. And, you know, at the appropriate level, you're going to have to gain a mastery of these things. So those are my thoughts. It makes sense. It's a good looking program. I'm looking forward to teaching these live classes as well as some video classes. A couple of things just to note, you can subscribe here on YouTube. We're going to do some ICND1 and ICND2 lessons. We'll be releasing those over time. So absolutely free training there that you can keep up with if you subscribe to our YouTube channel here. And then also visit us on our website at globalconfig.net. Over there, you can subscribe to our blog and our newsletter. We'll send out some details and updates on the courses that we have available to you, some tutorials, things along those lines. We do have video training that I release specifically through Pluralsight. And so right now we're working on some CCNA security stuff, and then we'll move back into the CCNP security. So if you like security and you want to pursue that path, definitely follow me over there. And with that, I'll bid you adieu, say thank you for watching, and happy labbing.